So while many people were distracted with the FOMC interest rate decision and FOMC press conference where we did get that volatility to the downside, we can see how the price got an immediate bounce. This is one of the scenarios that was talked about on yesterday's stream. Yeah, of course, I realize that we could drop here from the $118,000 range to test below 117K. But the probabilities were leaning that a higher low was very, very likely, despite getting that movement down to test the lows from Tuesday. So as you can see, what we're looking at here is some kind of a three-wave structure. Despite coming down here to test 116K, we're looking for an ABC or a WXY three-wave structure. And there's one simple reason why we are looking for this movement that we mentioned throughout yesterday's video update, and that is basically the movement up that we had since the lows of last Friday. That looks more impulsive. It's very five wavy and it's very one wavy when we consider the higher time frame waves. This still needs another wave, which is very likely to the upside, and that's where we have that huge amount of liquidity sitting above 120K. This is why I do believe that 120K plus is likely to happen between today and tomorrow. Of course, we do have some more news today. Personal income, which is in about 2 hours from now from updating this video. Now, usually the news have been bearish, right? So could we get that corrective move? We've got a beautiful bounce right now, overlapping here the lower high that we had from yesterday, which is making it very bullish. And there is one bearish case, which I do think has low probability. And you might think, well, the low probability is the one that's going to play out. We've been bullish throughout this range, understanding that it's unlikely that we do get a successful breakdown below 115K. Of course, that doesn't mean that we can revisit the lows of the range. Now let's just explain the highest probability scenarios right away on this video update. It would be this one right over here, where we have a three-wave structure finished and we have an impulsive move to the upside from Friday lows, and this, what we're looking at throughout the last few days, is a corrective structure. Now, if this were to be bearish, we would have to start thinking of an expanding diagonal, okay? Expanding diagonal to the downside, where you have 5 waves here. However, there is a little bit of a problem. Your wave 4 is slightly smaller than your wave 2, which is not preferred here, looking at an expanding diagonal to the downside. This would be the most bearish case scenario if you're looking at this to be a 5-wave structure, and inside of a larger expanding diagonal to the downside, where you have your wave 1, your wave 2, your wave 3 right over here, and your wave 4. Now, there is a little bit of an issue here. Your wave 4 does count better as an impulse. You need a 3-wave structure here inside of your wave 4, and this counts better as a 5-waver. This movement to the downside, of course, would be your first A wave, and then what you would be looking at here is a lower high from those highs that were created last Monday at 119.9K almost, right? And then you would be looking for that B wave formation between today and tomorrow, and then your wave C, which would be getting down below here the $115,000 to finally form that expanding diagonal to the downside, which ultimately would be bearish, and we would be looking for lower prices potentially throughout August. Low probability in this scenario, and there's one major reason why. It is the wave 4 right over here. It is this movement to the upside since we had from Friday's lows that looks incredibly impulsive. And you need this to be corrective if you want to see this expanding diagonal to come to fruition, which has low probability based on that wave 4. So what are we looking at? Well, I'm going to go with the highest probability. We have a 3-wave structure here to the downside, and potentially we have finished already our wave 2. This is your wave 1 that we've had from Friday lows on the weekend, previous weekend as well, that rally. We got the correction throughout the last few days, and now we are ready to continue to the upside and claim 120K. Now, the overall question for me right now is, will we get a successful breakout? Is this a wave 2 and we are just going to be ready to smash out in the next few days in a wave 3 right over here? or will we struggle at the strongest resistance that we do have inside of this range, which is a $120,000 level? As we do sweep up the lower highs from last week at above 120K, we do have a daily level at that zone. We have two daily levels, but being the most important one above us at 120.1K. Now, this is where we do have that huge amount of liquidity sitting above $120,000. There is that scenario where we do not manage to break out successfully here in a wave 3. And the price does really struggle to get above $120,000 and $121,000 throughout the next couple of days, and we do get that rejection, finally forming a three-wave structure. Now, yes, that is totally fine. If we form a three-wave structure here and a three-wave structure here, well, could we be forming a larger WXY? And this is where I come with my next problem here for this WXY, which would eventually, the Y wave, what you would be looking at is a potential flat later on, okay? So we need a lot of information to start speculating in this scenario. This would be your wave W, your wave X, and your wave Y would either be a flat, okay, to be formed, or a larger triangle where the range just continues potentially for another week before we get the breakout to the upside and hit all-time highs. Now, the problem with a larger WXY, this three-wave structure that we've had to the downside needs to be countered at some kind of an ABC movement, a three-wave ABC. You cannot have a WXY inside of your wave W, which brings the problem right now, because this last move that we've had to the downside inside of this very much achievable countered, okay, WXY, we can see how this has been more of a three-wave structure. I am having a little bit of a problem here to count this as a five-wave structure, because inside of a C wave, you need 5 waves. The same in your A wave, you do need some kind of a 5-wave structure. However, if we're counting all of this as an ABC, I have a problem with this last move to the downside that we've had throughout last week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It counts better as a 3-waver. If we would have got another leg here to the downside, it would have been a perfect 5-wave count to count this as an ABC. But we have a problem. It's more of a 3-waver, which counts better as a WXY double zigzag. So yeah, low probability as well for the moment, till proven otherwise, that we do have a 3-wave here, a 3-wave here, and potentially extending the range for longer, because a larger WXY, okay, doesn't look too possible here because of your wave Y here, all right, inside of this wave W, sorry. This counts better as a 3-wave instead of a 5-wave. That's what you need inside of a C wave for your wave W here in a zigzag. So there is a little bit of an issue here, without a doubt. Is it possible that we do form a zigzag down here in your wave A? This can be a wave A right over here. And what we could be forming is a 3-wave structure in your wave B to get to all-time high or close to all-time high, hitting the 0.9 Fibonacci, and then get the rejection and form a kind of a flat. Very speculative. This would overextend very much in time, and I don't think that this would be the highest probability, but we just need to be cautious about how we do get up here to 120K zone, okay? Because this is the moment where you either blast off, you form potentially your wave 1 and 2, a 1 and 2 here, and then you blast off, or you form your wave 1 is on the formation, you get a correction, and then you blast off, you got a double 1 2 1 2, and then you finally get that leg to the upside in the coming days in your wave 3, smashing through all-time high. I think this is what could be building up based on the structure that we do have on the chart. So yeah, what would be the next big major positions that I would be looking at? I am still currently in my swing long positions throughout multiple exchanges, still very much long on Bitcoin till at least 120K plus. That's what I would consider, depending on the reaction, to take those profits, okay? And, be very defensive with the positions, just being aware that this could be a 3-waver and that a corrective move down or potentially an aggressive move down could happen, right? Just definitely could happen. So if you are interested in trading, make sure to check out the links down below, guys. We do have Weeks and Bluffin that just requires an email and a password. On both of the platforms, you can get 20% cash back on your deposit. And on Weeks, you do get 25% fee reduction, okay? You got the second link for Bluffin or the fourth one for Weeks. They're both great exchanges, and you only need an email and a password to sign up. So let's go right away through the levels of resistance that we do have. Most importantly, then we can talk about the potential bounce that could happen if we do get a corrective structure here on this video update. And the level eventually is that daily, okay? And the lower highs where we have that huge amount of liquidity that is sitting above $120,000. I will be paying attention most importantly to the highest daily level at 120.1k or these lower highs at 120.3k from last Wednesday. If we do manage to get up there and we struggle, we close some candlesticks, 15-minute candlesticks, we get the rejection, okay? I would be very much of this scenario. I would be interested in taking a short hedge position, potentially to get a larger pullback of a few $1,000s, be very defensive, because most importantly, I am interested in longs at the lows of this range, guys, okay? So without a doubt, it's a possibility. Three-wave structure. If we do struggle and we do not break out in a wave three, if we do break out, I'm not interested in shorting. I need to see that rejection from this lower high after claiming the liquidity to consider the short position, as this could be a finished three-wave structure and the range could possibly continue for over a week potentially, right? What are the interesting next new long positions that I would be interested inside of this range? I mean, despite this being a potential long, a bit aggressive after reclaiming the lows or maybe hitting that naked point of control that we do have at 116k zone. I mean, all depending, the highest probability yesterday was not successfully breaking down $117,000. Yeah, we can hit 116, but ultimately not hitting this higher low that we formed on Friday at 114.8k. The probabilities based on yesterday's update was not coming down to this low, because what we're looking at here is this to be a very likely impulse. We're looking at this to be corrective. There was no big major signs of a multiple 1-2, then a three-wave here. We had a three-wave structure here to the downside, which was leaning on a larger kind of a corrective structure that was developing, right? This is why we were leaning on yesterday's video update that, we were likely going to get that bounce while a lot of people were distracted on the major drop, okay? Are we going to go lower? Are we going to fill that CME gap, okay, that we do have to the downside, which is sitting, at the 113 to 115k zone. There's a lot of distractions, of course, with all of this, but the charts give you the information, right? There's a technical reason believing that we do not hit 115k on yesterday's video update. We do realize that there is one more chance to get a leg down here based in a three-wave move, zigzag, ABC, or WXY. It's more of a WXY because we did form a flat here. When we do see yesterday's price action, we do have the zigzag move to the downside, okay, which your wave W would be here. And then you have this movement up in your wave X, okay, which is also a zigzag. When you go to the lower time frame, you can clearly see there's a zigzag move here to the upside, and then you form a flat, as you can see right over here on the chart, to finish your wave Y. So yeah, looking at this scenario, it does, eventually after coming and sweeping up these lower highs, when I take a look at the bearish case, well, obviously a multiple 1-2 is off the chart. And, the most bearish case scenario would be that expanding diagonal, which, your wave 4 is smaller than your wave 2, and you don't want to see that in an expanding diagonal, which is obviously, decreasing the chances here for this to be some kind of a bearish move to form a lower high here and break down the lows that we did form yesterday. And there's higher probability that the movement down is likely going to be corrective, and we're going to look for that leg up to hit 120k plus. That's just looking at the charts and the probability, and obviously taking into consideration the liquidity that we do have above us. There's a lot of liquidity, and there's massive bullish CVD divergence, okay, on the higher time frame. The amount of shorts that have been piling up here throughout the last few days and even couple of weeks is absolutely massive. There's lower lows from that higher low created on the 9th, 10th of July, which is eventually a massive absorption here, making this extremely, likely to be corrective, not only looking at the CVD divergence, which are bullish, but also considering here that we do have, bullish Elliott wave structure. So yeah, that's the bearish case scenario, a low probability at the moment here, looking at the local price action. I do see extreme high probability based on this information that we have in the last few days that we should be forming that three-wave structure finally to claim 120k plus, which is the overall general idea that we had on yesterday's video update. Okay, so now most importantly, yeah, we have seen a significant bounce on the lower time frame since we did have the FOMC press conference, and we got a significant bounce here, which looks very impulsive. It looks impulsive because you have that leg up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And inside of these 5 waves, well, eventually you can count a double 1, 2 here, okay? And then you got your third wave, and then your 4, 5, 4, 5. So a corrective structure, some kind of a correction to happen here in the next coming hours, does look very, very interesting. So the moment you do finish this correction, if it does happen, like I said, I don't want to speculate on short positions. I'm not too interested. I missed this short position, but if you did not take profit, well, you're basically at entry point and you are at the risk of actually losing that trade if you do not, place your stop loss or got out at break even. If you have a stop loss here, you're just really asking to get stopped out and give money back to the market. So the next movement down, if we do get that correction, it does look very 5-wavy. I'll be very interested in looking at a 3-wave structure in this zone. And eventually, if that 3-wave structure, starts claiming the last low, from the first move down, and also claiming the low high, this would eventually be extremely bullish. And I would just be looking to compound my long positions or get into another new long position to basically claim 120k plus. And then we'll check the reaction at this zone. If it is going to get a blast off, then if we blast off, then eventually we maintain that trade open. But if we do get that reaction, okay, we do reject from those lower highs after claiming that huge amount of liquidity, then eventually I would just consider taking, most of the profits at that zone, okay, regardless, if we do get a big pullback or we just get a rejection and move to higher levels, it's just a zone to really take profit, purely based on the resistance that we have there. It might be a liquidity grab, it might be a 3-wave structure that ends up in a large range throughout the next coming days and weeks, and just happy to take some of those profits from those long positions that have been developing throughout the last few weeks. And I think it's about time that we should be collecting some profits at a major resistance zone, considering the possible bearish case scenario after a 3-wave structure that could get a deeper corrective move. Not much more has to be said on this update, guys. If you are interested in joining the Legends community or the Telegram exclusive channel where I provide my different setups, we've got my analyst as well that is providing different possibilities on trading setups that we do have on altcoins. Mainly I mainly focus on Bitcoin, and that's where I share my information in the Telegram. You got the first link down below if you want to join that. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video update. It does seem like that there's extreme high probability that we do take out 120k plus despite that drop yesterday. It was the overall general idea to get that 3-wave move to the upside, okay, despite the press conference and the interest rate decision. Probabilities on the chart were not getting a successful breakdown from this little correction that we've had in the last few days. Thank you very much for joining, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.